99-cent rental.
This is 99 Cent Rental. I'm your host, Brian White, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, Dave White. Hey, Dave, how you doing over there?
Thank you for asking that question. I'm all right. I just think, can we just take a second up top here and talk about the Australian breakdancing at the Olympics?
Did I blow your mind with that?
Because are we sure that that's not performance art?
No. I don't know. I just don't know how something like that happens. Because here's the thing is that it's like all Olympic sports where there's a men division and there's a women's division. And so she came out, the big girl from Australia, and did whatever that was.
Something. It's like watching someone who is asked to perform based solely on a description of breakdancing from a 5-year-old. It's like real kind of like jarring, lazy voguing.
Yeah, and then because then in the men's division, the Australian b-boy comes over and he's like, "Holy shit, I gotta make up for this," and he's like on his head the whole time and like flying all over the place. It's like truly acrobatic and impressive. But my God, that shit is that was crazy. When my daughter showed me that, I was like, "That's not real. That can't be real."
I didn't think it was. It's fantastic.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. So fucking funny. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The Olympics has been so fucking strange.
Yeah. There's that one dude who lost because his dick knocked the pole off of the pole. And you gotta feel a little bit bad for these people, like dick pole vaulting guy.
I don't feel bad for him at all because he is going to be able to dine out on that for the rest of his life.
I guess.
Yeah, I would have brought the gold home in pole vaulting, for France, but my dick was too big. And, what are you gonna do?
This is the weirdest Olympics I've ever seen. You got heavy metal at the fucking palace at the beginning. You got that weird, French drag performance, and then man, it was incredible. I didn't even watch much of it. I just heard about it, and I'm already pretty happy.
Yeah, I'm cool with that, and especially the fact that like Snoop Dogg was like central to the American presentation of it. Shit, it's just crazy. It's like people are making this stuff up on acid. It's just insane.
Has the Olympics jumped the shark? Is that what this is?
I don't know, but they have set the bar really, really high. Like the next one to come.
You gotta watch out though, because your dick's gonna knock that bar straight off.
Oh yeah. Whew. Well, it's hard to explain to someone who never had the experience what a trip to the video store was like back in the day. The shelves were choked with absolutely bizarre crap made on tiny budgets, completely divorced from any recognizable reality. Ooh, especially this movie tonight. And it was the best. And we intend to talk about every one of them. Just before we get into it, here's a little housekeeping. You want to keep up with us between episodes, you can find us on Instagram at Bring Me the Axe Pod. Dave's over there at That Queer Wolf. We have a good time. You should follow us if you're doing the social media thing. It's a good time. I'm also on TikTok. If you do that sort of thing,
dancing.
No, I'm not dancing. It would look, if I were to do that, it would probably look like the Australian breakdancer. I would be the Australian breakdancer of TikTok.
You would then be on some sort of news program, I imagine.
Oh, they would probably give me a
TikTok
reality show and then immediately regret it.
Yeah.
So, you can just look us up by name over there. And if you don't know, we have another show called Bring Me the Axe. Our latest episode covering the Arch 90s Scream cash-in, I Know What You Did Last Summer, is out now, and we'll be back next week with a look at the Academy Award-winning horror movie, The Silence of the Lambs.
Oh. You've issued a challenge, I think.
I did. I'm just getting it in early. You can also contact us directly at 99centrentalpod@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or suggestions. Do let us know if there's a cheesy movie that you love and would like to hear us give it the business. And lastly, if you like what you hear, you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. We're on YouTube now. Search us by name and subscribe if you prefer to consume your podcast that way. And you'd be doing us a favor by leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so, get to it. And also, tell your friends.
Do that.
Just nudge them and be like, hey, you like movies and you like podcasts. How about you listen to this one?
Yep.
It works. And if you listen on YouTube, do us a favor, give the episode a like and leave a comment. We love hearing from you guys. I just want to get that all out of the way right at the top of the show because, hey, Dave.
Yeah.
This guy looks familiar over here. Who's this?
Well, you see, a movie of this caliber is... I was not confident we could do this on our own. So I found us a ringer. He is an actor, podcaster, co-host of Uy Que Horror. Sorry about that. And a goddamn gentleman. It's Jonny Atkinson.
Hi, guys.
Jonathan, welcome.
Hi, thanks
welcome
so
to
much.
our salon.
I so appreciate it. And listen, Bryan, look, if you start wanting to share some dance videos on TikTok, I say do it, because if that Australian can make it to breaking, you can too. And I would definitely watch. So yeah.
Oh man. Okay. I'm feeling the pressure. I think I might have to actually start doing this.
I'm gonna
just start posing while I do those what to watch videos.
Absolutely. Well, what did you say? Vague voguing? I mean, that's basically what it was with that Australian. Yeah. Was she from Australia? Is that the one?
I think so. Wasn't it Australia?
Wow.
Yeah, she's from us. She was the Australian B girl.
Listen, bless her, because she gave us some quality memes. We will never forget her. And honestly,
she did her best, I guess.
Yeah, she got out there. She had a good time. And I've been watching a lot of the Olympics, and let me tell you, it is the most stressful fucking thing in the entire world. But holy shit, do I get into it. It's been an incredible Olympics this year, but it has been batshit insane.
Oh yeah, we didn't even mention like the crazy like air rifle shooters with their like cyberpunk outfits, and that dude from Turkey who just kind of showed up and like won the silver.
Yep.
It's crazy over there. Like,
it's like an Italian action movie from the 80s.
Absolutely.
Yeah. My God. Yeah, fucking crazy. So Jesus Christ. This movie. Let's give him a taste, you guys. Let's let him know what we're watching tonight.
At the far end of the universe, there is a planet ruled by a being of utter evil. And there is only one man who dares challenge him. They are locked in a battle to the death. A battle that will take them across the heavens.
Stop him!
A battle that will finally be fought.
I want them hunted down and brought to me!
Across the face
Police! Nobody move!
of Earth.
I think I'm gonna need some backup.
Can you show us the way?
Of course. No.
Somebody help me!
From a distant galaxy, they have come to Earth. Dolph Lundgren as He-Man, Frank Langella as Skeletor. Only they have the powers to be masters of the universe. Live the adventure.
Wow.
My God. Guys, I had a question for you.
Clap.
Has an expensive movie ever looked this cheap?
I was watching this, and as I was watching it, I was like, how can a movie be really kind of impressive visually, but also feel really fucking cheap? Like, this is what you'd get if you take Conan the Barbarian and Star Wars and Star Trek and you mush them all together and you make them kiss.
So, do we know what the budget of this movie was?
It's like $22 million.
$22 million.
Wow. So,
Which does not sound like a lot, but in 1987 money, that was. I actually have a little note about comparable movies at the time that were much more successful than this one. That's a lot of fucking money for a special effects movie in 1987.
Well, the thing is, so I haven't seen this movie in, I'm going to say, 30 years. But this movie was a huge part of my youth, of my upbringing, specifically because of my brother, who is just like me, except taller and bigger and very, very straight, of which I am not. But my brother Chris had like a collection. Well, as a family, we had movies that we'd always rewatch, like Spaceballs, The Princess Bride. But my brother specifically had his collection of movies that he would always rewatch, and by default, I would as well. One of them was that weird Robin Hood movie, The Prince of Thieves. Do you remember that movie?
The Kevin
Costner. There were a few others, but this movie specifically, Masters of the Universe, is what I call a Chris classic. One of my brother's classic movies that he would watch over and over. So I did too. And I have such a soft spot in my heart for this film. Like the waves of nostalgia that came rushing back to me as I rewatched this. Like I said, I haven't seen it in forever. And as a kid, I remember watching this movie and it was so impressive. The graphics, the visuals, it was so beautiful to look at. And to look at it later, 30 years later, I mean, you really do have to kind of just give into it. But I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. Damn, nothing like, a few years passing for you to be like, whoa, this is aged interestingly.
Dave, do you remember seeing this? Because I took you to the movies.
Yeah, we saw this in the theater.
Wow.
And I'm sure we watched it a bunch of times afterwards.
Yeah. We definitely did. Because I had a really weird, like, I was like the perfect age for these toys, but like, for whatever reason, I didn't connect with them. I don't believe we ever really actually had any of them, but I was definitely familiar with the IP from the cartoons and stuff. And I definitely remember, like, this was at a time in my life, I was probably 11 when this came out, and you still don't have that, like, critical thinking part of your brain sort of developed. So as a kid, you just like every movie that you see.
Exactly.
But when I came out of this one, I was like, what the fuck was that?
Oh,
because
interesting.
like none of the characters really look like the characters from the toys or the cartoon. Most of it takes place on Earth, which is such a weird choice for them to make. But there was like a really strange disappointment. But what I will definitely tell you now is watching it as an adult, as a grown ass man, I was so pleased with it because when I came out the other side of it, I'm like, this movie is many things. One thing it is not is boring.
Oh, that's for damn sure. This was
it is. This was nonstop
fun.
guns.
Yeah, it was ridiculous, and I was so pleased to come back to it and be like, okay, it's probably just gonna be like a shit heap. We're gonna get through. Look, there are definitely bad things about this movie, but the fact that the whole time I was watching it, I was thoroughly entertained says a lot about the movie, you know. And as a kid, I didn't. Sure, my brother was like playing with He-Man toys and stuff, and I was on the other side playing with like gem dolls and shit like that. But still, this movie so solidly stuck in my brain because it might be kind of a pile of shit, but it's a fun pile of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's unbelievably loud and stupid and very colorful, and like I suppose that's all a movie really needs to be.
Sure.
But like nostalgia is so central to this podcast in particular, since like we're going back and watching all these movies that we loved when we were kids, and so many times we will get to one of these movies and come out the other side of watching it and be like, man, that really fucking sucks.
Yeah, please see our episode on Rad where my response is, what the fuck is this?
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have seen it. I recently saw the television Glow, and there is a very pivotal character moment in that where the main character goes back and watches the sort of the show that's kind of at the heart of the movie. And it's not the same show that he remembers. It's not even close to it. And that is like the experience that crushing sense of defeat is that sort of experience that we have going back on some of these movies.
Absolutely.
So I'm so glad that I did not have that with this one.
What a genius choice in that film, just to give a little shout out to that film, that like that part where the character sees that part of like the TV shows looking nothing like they remembered. That is fucking genius. And I just need to give a little shout out to Eileen, my co-host at Uy Que Horror, because she and I saw that movie together on my birthday, and we were both deeply eyebrows furrowed down just because we were super confused. However, we loved it at the same time, and we had a wonderful conversation. Yeah. So, hey, Eileen, just a little shout out.
You guys want to get into this? Shall we do some facts?
Yeah.
All right. So the year was 1987. Year of our Lord. So here are some other movies that were released in 1987. Alan Quatermain and the Lost City of Gold.
That's the sequel?
That's the sequel, yeah.
I've never heard
From
that of that in my
87?
entire life. Never heard of that.
In 87. I think the first one was in 86. Or maybe it was even earlier.
They're
but
they're like Indiana Jones ripoffs.
Oh, now.
yeah, they got a Richard Chamberlain, I think,
Yep.
is the guy who plays the main character.
Wow.
Yeah, Elvira. I think Elvira is the villain.
Holy
in this
shit. Wow.
one. Yeah. Or it might be the other one. I might be getting them confused. They are very similar movies.
Sure.
Let's see. Over the Top was also released this year. That's the Rocky arm wrestling Rocky movie.
Yeah,
with
I almost
Stallone.
said it was a thumb wrestling movie. It's actually a truck driving arm wrestling movie.
It should be a thumb wrestling movie.
In my head, it is for some reason.
Let's see. Also in 87, Penitentiary 3 came out.
I
Classic.
didn't know there was a third one.
Classic.
Yeah, and that one's fucked up because that one's got a little guy, a little boxer in prison, a little person whose name is Midnight Thud or something
Wow.
like that.
I say classic, but I've actually never
Yeah.
seen that movie and never even heard of it. But it must be a classic.
It has a really strange vibe. I really actually like the Penitentiary movies quite a bit, but that one is fucked up and it's very canon.
Oh, sure.
Speaking of canon, American Ninja 2: The Confrontation came out in 1987.
Wow.
The Confrontation.
Yep. And capping it off for the year of 1987, the movie that broke canon, Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, came out.
Ooh. Wow.
Yep. Those were all canon movies, by the way. In 1987, they released 34 movies.
Holy
My
shit.
God.
Yes. Most movie studios, for a reference, they released 6 to 12, 12 being like a kind of rare high end for it. No, it was 34 for
Oh,
canon
they're
that
just
year. It
going
was their
for
biggest
broke.
year for
They're
releases.
just going for it.
Literally going for broke. This is the year that broke canon films.
Wow.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that in a little bit because this movie is a real sort of case study on canon, who I love. Like this last week, in preparation for this, like I watched the Canon Films documentary Electric Boogaloo. I watched
Wow.
like Death Wish 2. I watched like a whole bunch of Canon movies because it just kind of got it on the brain. And I love them so much.
Well,
Electric
also,
Boogaloo, Death
RoboCop
Wish
came out
2.
that year.
Okay, so let's talk about addressing the budget. I want to talk about that a little bit. So the budget for this movie was originally budgeted at $16 million. In 87, that's not a small amount of money for a special effects movie. So Canon, despite the fact that they were bleeding money all over the place, they threw an additional $6 million at it to bring the budget to around $22 million, which again, not too shabby. To contrast this, RoboCop was released the same year, and it had a budget of around $14 million.
Wow.
And that movie was crazy successful.
Mm-hmm.
The Terminator was released only a few years prior. That had a budget of $7 million.
Whoa.
And yet somehow this movie at $22 million looks the way that it does. I have no idea how that could possibly be.
Bad
I
director.
think that it's ultimately that Canon is just really bad with money. Also, the director sucks.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the director for a moment. The director is a guy named Gary Goddard, who is easily one of our most strangest directors yet. Prior to this movie, he had never directed anything, nor had he really done much in film, which explains quite a bit about this movie.
That's because he didn't work in the film industry, actually.
No, he had one writing credit to his name, which is the R-rated Tarzan Vanity Project that was directed by John Derrick for his wife Bo Derrick. And prior to that, he wrote the most coked up treatment for Marvel when Stan Lee and Neil Bogart of Casablanca Records were trying to get a Dazzler movie made. I am going to link to that article in Jim Shooter's blog and the original treatment because it is the craziest bullshit I have ever heard.
Was
It
Dazzler?
had-
Dazzler was the disco star, right?
She was the disco star that they were trying to sort of create. They created her for the X-Men.
The look
And
on
then-
Johnny's face right now is so amazing.
Lost.
It's either he's bewildered or excited or something
A
like
little
that.
bit of
So
both.
Dazzler came out in the late 70s at the sort of like as like disco ascendant, right? And so they were like Marvel being Marvel, we're like, we need to capitalize on this. So they created a disco queen mutant for the X-Men. And her whole thing is she makes light out of sound. And then everybody was like, holy shit, there's an animated movie in this project, like in this character. And so Neil Bogart, who was the head of Casablanca Records at the time,
a lunatic in his own right.
yeah, and he teamed up with Stan Lee, who was I think he was publisher at Marvel at the time. And they were like, we're going to make an animated movie out of this. And so they got together and they got a treatment written by Gary Goddard, the director of this movie, that also features Cher played the villain.
Holy shit.
And her henchmen were Kiss.
Yes. Knew it.
And Dazzler's like buddies who help her out in the movie were the Village People. And there was a big action set piece where Kiss fights the Village People.
We need this movie. I demand that this movie
was
get
not
made.
made. This sounds like the gayest film in the universe of film.
Yeah.
In history.
Unreal.
And the fact that it does not exist
like it also had,
is heartbreaking.
And it had like cameos like Rodney Dangerfield
Holy
was supposed
shit.
to be in it. Like,
wow. Somebody needs
like,
to make this happen now. We need to make this happen.
And so what ends up happening is after they get Goddard's treatment, they read it, and Bogart is like, holy shit, this isn't an animated movie. This is a feature film, you guys. And then the whole thing kind of runs off the rails, and like John Derek walks away with it.
And at some point, someone must have seen Kiss Meets the Phantom of the Park, and they were like, oh, never mind. We can't make this.
I know. Oh, boy.
Sounds like there were a lot of drugs involved.
Oh, the most cocaine movie ever made. Like worse than Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, easily.
But not worse than Maximum Overdrive.
No, but anyways, this hiring Gary Goddard based on these criteria definitely follows in canon's well-worn pattern of hiring whoever is available, cheap, and willing. Following this fiasco, Goddard goes on to a fairly successful career directing video elements for theme park attractions. Most of the stuff that he did for Universal Studios has since been decommissioned, but the work that he did for Hershey Park is still running.
He also did something called Depot's Undersea 3D Wonder Show at the Atlanta Aquarium, which I have seen.
Oh shit,
wow.
really?
It is a ripoff of, what's the
Finding
one with the
Nemo?
fish? Yeah, Finding Nemo.
Yeah, that tracks. Unfortunately, he was also named by several men starting in 2014 in a series of rape allegations.
Yeah.
Among them being one of Bryan Singer's accomplices.
Wow.
And the allegations go back years, and there's never been and likely never will be an indictment against him. So fuck this guy.
Fuck
Which is like,
this
I don't
guy.
get, so Bryan Singer is, or at least was, pretty titanic in Hollywood. Gary Goddard is fucking nobody. Like, he's
I
a
know.
guy who makes theme park attraction, but like theme park theatrics.
Yeah.
Like, that is some wild white privilege.
It's so fucking crazy. Like how he got into this sort of like circle is really beyond me. Cause like the reason that he's on this project in the first place is because Ed Pressman, the producer on this movie, took the Universal backlot tour in Hollywood, and he liked the sort of Conan the Barbarian stunt spectacle so much that he like went and found out who was like behind it and who directed it and wrote it. And they were like, it's a guy named Gary Goddard. And he was like fucking hired.
Wow.
Now, look, I have taken that very tour in the probably late 80s, early 90s. I don't think I would have hired a director based solely on that.
Well, you are not Menahem Golan or Yoram Globus.
Thank God for that.
Now, I just very quickly want to say I'm really glad that I didn't know anything about Gary Goddard, and honestly didn't know much about Bryan Singer. Is that his name? Bryan Singer?
Bryan Singer,
because I wasn't really into. Sorry to X-Men fans, I just wasn't into those X-Men films and all the stuff that he did. I know he did a lot of stuff, but I just think it's important that you brought this to my attention and that we obviously mentioned this on the podcast, just to put some respect on the victims' names, but also, just because this is where I come at it from, because sometimes you hear about a person like that and you're like, I'm just not going to talk about this movie anymore, and I will not associate myself with that at all. But since this movie is such a because it has, like I said, this really important part of my youth, of my childhood, I choose to celebrate that movie and at the same time be like, fuck this fucking guy. Because this movie was a good time to me. I can recognize both things at the same time.
And this is actually, I think, a good example of that. It is a good sort of case study for that, in that obviously fuckloads of people worked on this movie, not just Gary Goddard, but once you start to dig into it, you realize that a lot of the reasons why it didn't work at the time is because of Gary Goddard. Like, if you want to celebrate a movie and still trash the piece of shit who made it, this is the movie for you because he's kind of the reason it was bad.
Absolutely.
Right. I think because this is a movie that is a clash of contrasts in the sense that it is clearly a movie directed by a man who has never really directed a feature film before.
Or maybe even seen a feature film before. 'Cause, what the fuck?
But all of the stuff that works has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with the production designer, William Stout, who's making a second appearance on the pod. He did all the production design on Return of the Living Dead, like all the shit that's so cool about that movie.
That's amazing.
So like all of all of the production design on this was by him. And when he couldn't figure out how to kind of like get a He-Man design that didn't look stupid, he called up Moebius, Jean Giraud. And so
the artist?
And so he's the guy who created the He-Man design. And a lot of the stuff that also makes it in was the result of Ralph McQuarrie, who was the production designer on Star Wars. And so most of his stuff kind of got tossed because it was from a draft of the script when the movie took place like entirely in Eternia. But like bits and pieces of it are still in. I think like Eva Lynn's costume was a Ralph McQuarrie thing. So yeah. So all the shit that works has nothing to do with Gary Goddard.
Because you could see that there is a good movie in this movie. It's just not there.
Well, speaking of Eva Lynn, that woman comes in here and steals this fucking movie.
Meg Foster's great.
Eva
Meg
Lynn
Foster is captivating.
Is the reason I am gay. I'm pretty sure. I saw this and I was like, look at this fierce ass hoe. Oh, now I know why I'm fucking gay. It's because this queen stomping through this film, taking charge. I am obsessed with Meg Foster. She's incredible in this film. And along with her, there are, look, Dolph Lundgren leaves a little something to be desired, but some of the actors, some of the work they're doing in this film, thank you. Performing for the back of the theater. I love it.
Dude, let's talk about Frank Langella.
Frank Langella leaves not a scrap of scenery unchewed.
Holy shit, because if I am not like mystified and hypnotized by Meg Foster's presence in this movie, it is his performance that just makes me love this movie.
Give him the awards.
Every scene he is on, he is in love with what he is doing.
Absolutely.
Like every gesture, every delivery of line that he's doing is just, he's so fucking happy to be there. And it is crazy.
Yeah.
Because Frank Langella was an Oscar nominee and a multiple Tony Award winner. He's just a legend of the stage.
It's almost like you can't believe underneath that terrible mask that he's got going, it's fucking Frank Langella. Yep. And I must say, look, I was sitting here at 40 years old watching this movie, and I was like, I was terrified of Frank Langella as Skeletor as a kid, and I still was like, this motherfucker is scary. He's still scary.
It's that mask. That mask is doing a lot of the lifting. But like he's got this one line towards the end where he's like, tell me about the loneliness of evil.
What is this, Shakespeare? What the hell's going on here?
Yeah, it has a real like Tears in Rain, like from Blade Runner, that kind of feel to it where you're like, Jesus, it's a kid's movie.
When he kills that character Saurod, he's like, I am not in a giving mood this day.
Damn.
Which is actually a line from Richard III.
Stop. That's fucking amazing.
Yep.
I knew it.
So he took this role because his son loved the toys.
Wow.
And was running around the house doing He-Man shit. And so when this script somehow crossed his desk, like he didn't even read it. He was like, "Yes, I'm all the way in for this."
Nice. And he was.
Yep.
And I'm sure most people probably haven't heard of like Frank Langella. Like at this point, I mean, there was a time when he was quite famous.
He's been in so many, like a lot of movies. He's done a lot of TV. His, obviously his bread and butter is the stage, which I think is why he's kind of a bit of a deep cut.
Is he still alive? He died, didn't he?
No, I think he's alive.
I believe it was him. I think it was him who wrote a book that was just like talking shit about a bunch of people in Hollywood.
Ooh. Wow.
It's kind of like the last Truman Capote book, Answered Prayers, where it's just like him saying really shitty things. And I could be wrong, and if I am, I'm sorry, but I'm fairly certain it's Frank Langella who wrote that.
Yeah.
It's like an autobiography where he just like tears down everybody.
Yeah. So we've also got Dolph Lundgren proving that all roads lead to Grace Jones.
That's true.
Yep. Dolph was a two-time European karate champion who began dating Grace Jones in 1982 because he was her bodyguard at the time.
Yep.
Wow.
So then, she picks up a couple of movie roles and then brings him with her, and is like, you should also act.
Sure.
And so he goes to like the U.S. and he takes up acting lessons. Best known for obviously Ivan Drago in Rocky IV. This is another sort of like canon hire where they're like, they see something and they're so enthusiastic about what they saw that in spite of the fact that there are like objective qualities that make like this hire particularly bad, like they don't care. Like they loved him in Rocky IV so much that they were like, he's the next big thing, he's gonna be like the biggest movie star in America, and they hired him, completely forgetting that he's only got like 2 lines in that movie.
Right. Well,
and then he doesn't speak much English.
Well, but you know what's
Right.
funny in this movie as I was watching it? First of all, he looks the part. That works, but
That's the thing, is he is probably actually was like the perfect hire because he very much looks the part.
yeah,
Yeah, it was either like, do either of you know who Peter Berlin is?
that sounds very familiar. Who
So
is that?
I feel like the only other thing you could have gotten, Peter Berlin would look more like He-Man. I'm pretty sure he actually is the model for He-Man.
Well, because of the sort of page boy hair.
yeah,
Oh,
but
thank
yeah,
God
other
they
than
didn't
that,
give us
Dolph
that hair.
Lundgren.
I'm so
Oh,
glad.
I know.
Please,
I know.
Please, God, no.
Yep. Before all of this, he was working on a master's degree in chemical engineering,
Oh.
Which he does
bailed-
have. He has one
Yes.
now.
Yeah. I believe he might be a PhD.
He has a
at this
PhD in
Holy
chemical
shit.
engineering.
point. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. At the time of this movie, though, he bailed on a full scholarship to MIT in order to get into acting.
Wow.
Yep.
Maybe it worked better.
Everybody in the cast, Dolph hated making this movie the most,
Yeah, you can tell in interviews too. Like he does not have a lot of fond memories of this.
which is odd because he seems to really like he's doing it. you know?
Yeah.
Like there's nothing. His acting's wooden and shit, but like there's a little bit of charisma to
I think
it.
he's fine.
Did he say
Yeah,
it was
fine.
because of the director that he had a bad experience?
So the weird thing about I watched a bunch of interviews with people because I have the Umbrella Blu-ray release of this that just came out, and it has the extended, like the full interviews from Electric Boogaloo with the people that were they interviewed for this movie. And I mean, it's long. It's like an hour and 45 minutes of interviews.
Oh, shit.
And everybody seems to kind of dance around the fact that Gary Goddard fucked this movie up. Like they'll say, people will be like, oh no, he was a nice guy. He came from somewhere that wasn't Hollywood. Like everybody has these sort of euphemistic ways of being like, he didn't know what he was doing. Dolph Lundgren is the one who seems to be less interested in decorum. He doesn't outright say that it was a bad experience because of that, but he kind of heavily infers that like, there's a lot happening here where it's like bad direction and no one really knew what they were supposed to do. And like the
Okay.
costume is ridiculous. And they couldn't, because he is such a large man and he wears almost no clothes, they couldn't get like a stunt person because the person would have to look exactly like him because there's nothing you can't cover up. You can't obscure the fact that, it's not him by putting a costume on him or something. So he ended up having to do a lot of the stunts because they couldn't get someone who looked like him. And then he also, they were supposed to dub the audio for him, and which I think is a little offensive because he does a fine job, but they ran out of money and time. And so he just ends up doing, they just use his audio track. And I think he's fine. I mean, it's a fucking kid's movie, but like you can tell also in the interviews with Gary Goddard, he talks a bunch of shit about like Dolph Lundgren specifically. Gary Goddard comes off like an asshole in that movie, but he talks a bunch of shit about Dolph Lundgren specifically about like how he couldn't do the line readings, how he would do something different in rehearsal than he does on, when they would do the take. And it's just like, it just sounds like nobody really talked to each other ever or knew what they were doing, except there are tons of like well-qualified people working on this movie. They just seem to be like, whatever, man.
Except for Gary Goddard.
Yeah, well, because he seems to think that he did a really great job on this movie.
No. Also, there is like this movie was made at a time before, like right now, like if they were to make another like live action He-Man movie, we'd be like, of course they are, because like there's a shitload of like toys and video games and comic book movies. But like back then, you had Superman, and that was kind of it, right? And so there was a quality to making this movie that I think several people in the cast, when they were in it, sort of felt silly about. Because Meg Foster also made some remarks where she was like, I tried to make this character like Lady Macbeth, and I'm like, all right, cool.
Okay.
I realize that you're like that you're in a you're in a ridiculous costume and you're talking to a guy named Skeletor, but like just accept it.
Well,
Frank Langella's doing it.
I gotta say something to that though, because like that goes to show why some of this works though. When she comes in with that kind of actor mindset of being like this, she's actually put thought into the role, which is why parts of this movie actually work.
Yeah.
And like with no thanks to this fucking alleged fucking piece of shit asshole director.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's also why some things don't. Like, you could see when you lean into the kind of silliness or campiness, so whatever you want to do to make this work for you, you could see that Frank Langella's doing it. You can see that Meg Foster's doing it. The ones who aren't doing it are the ones where you're like, God, why don't you just go home then?
Yeah. And so, like, rounding out our cast, we got Courtney Cox.
Yes.
One of the most iconic faces of the 90s before she was Gail Weathers or Monica Geller. She was the girl Springsteen pulled on stage to dance with in Brian De Palma's video for Dancing in the Dark.
I always forget Brian De Palma directed that.
I know, like, Hollywood directors routinely directed music videos. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. By this point, Courtney had done a good deal of TV. She even landed a regular role on the series Misfits of Science, which is a show that I loved to death.
She was on Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah. Yep. She's a perfectly capable actor who, like the rest of her castmates, is doing her best to make sense of what she's supposed to be doing and what is going on in this movie. She seems perpetually confused and maybe a little ashamed.
Look, I fucking love her in this movie, and I so appreciate, Brian, that you said Gail Weathers before Monica Geller. Thank you very much.
I have no love of Friends. That's the
and
thing,
I have
but you
all
gotta
the love
fucking
for
mention
Scream and Gail Weathers, so thank you for saying that.
Yeah. So there's supposedly a shitload of taglines. There was like one theatrical poster for this, and it had one tagline, and it's fine. It is a battle fought in the stars now comes to Earth.
Oh,
Nah.
sure, it'll do.
Sums it up.
Yep.
So I want to just before we like really sort of dive into the plot, I want to talk about canon a little bit because I fucking love canon. And this was the death knell of the canon group. Like, obviously, they keep going for a couple of years after this, and they go into the 90s, but it's really not the same. So at the time of this movie's production, canon was in a really bad spot. They fell under the scrutiny of the SEC and the FTC, I believe, for some really shaky financial practice. And it turns out that it was nothing illegal, just very, very bad business practice while balancing a massive amount of debt. And so what they were doing was they were paying for movies coming up with movies with like box office that came in. So it was essentially like a Ponzi scheme with themselves.
Wow.
And so they were making up for losses with budgets secured for movies that hadn't even been made yet, because they were the guys who would go to Cannes and would bring like 6 posters with them for movies that like they may not even make and would just sell international rights to them.
Yeah, and this is not all that uncommon either. Like, this is how a lot of low budget companies got their shit made. This is how a lot of real estate is developed, for that matter.
This is how like Italy did it. Like that was the entire business model for like the entire sort of like Italy in the 60s and 70s and in the 80s as well. But like eventually
Except they're making movies for like $2 million, not $22 million.
Sure. So 87 was a critical year. Canon was on a really bad losing streak. With a few exceptions, none of their movies were ever huge successes. And whatever movies they did make on, or whatever money they did make on movies was immediately rolled into future projects. I was really pleased to find out that there was like nothing really sort of scandalous or shitty about these two. Like that I actually
they're just bad businessmen.
I just come away sort of like feeling really good about going on in Globus because their whole thing is they were just in love with making movies and they just wanted to make movies. And that was it. They have this like massive enthusiasm, even though neither of them really seems to understand what American audiences want.
Yeah, they loved making movies. They didn't love selling movies. They were not good at that part.
Yeah. the company is just completely unsustainable in this respect. And so this year, they were trying to break away from their reputation as a schlock house, and they picked up 3 major vehicles. They signed Stallone for a couple of pictures, but only under the condition that he be paid some insane salary for both of the movies. And in 87, they spent $25 million on that movie I mentioned, Over the Top. That's more than Masters of the Universe cost.
Holy shit.
And that's a fucking truck driving arm wrestling movie.
Yeah, the truck driving thumb wrestling movie. Yeah,
Yeah. And also tanked super hard.
because it is a bad movie.
It's a really bad movie. It is inevitable that we cover that one eventually. They lured Christopher Reeves back to Superman by more or less letting him determine the story of the movie, which ends up being this really kind of bizarre no nukes story with Christopher Reeves as Superman and a Chippendales dancer as the villain Nuclear Man.
Holy shit! I gotta see this.
I'm listening.
Yeah, they secured $36 million in budget, and then after that they cut it in half, and basically used half of the budget to pay off some of their debts. And so the movie cost something like $16 to $18 million. By contrast, Superman 2 costs like $50 million.
Wow.
Yep. And because it's a canon movie, it's like cartoony and gonzo and really bizarre, and so like nobody saw it, and it tanked incredibly hard, so badly that it kind of killed the company. Like by the time this movie comes out, they're just sort of like dead man walking. It's a matter of time.
And everybody knew that too, which is kind of interesting. It's like it was, if you look at the trade papers at the time, or any of the press really at the time, there's a lot of articles about how canon is failing and how they're just sort of like hemorrhaging money. And it's a little bit odd that that type of information would just be kind of out there, and people like Variety and Billboard would just be like reporting on it.
No. So, yeah, the final nail in the coffin for canon in 87 was Masters of the Universe, an adaptation of one of the most popular toy lines of the era. Masters of the Universe was the second best-selling action figure line after G.I. Joe.
Wow.
And at this time of production, the cartoon was still quite popular. They couldn't lose.
Well, at the time they got the license, it was still popular. 2 years later, it wasn't popular anymore because kids are fickle and it's a fucking toy line. And so that's, I think, an important part of this story is that when they start making the movie, it couldn't lose. Like this should have been a fucking slam dunk. And yet shit gets dragged out so long. The licensing are, like back and forth with Mattel over licensing. And then Mattel has like a shitload of requirements of things they will and won't let them do. And like, it's just this long, protracted argument between all these different companies. And by the time this comes out in 1987, kids have moved on and they're now like super into, I don't know, Ninja Turtles or whatever the fuck is the hot thing.
This was coming out as Ninja Turtles, as like that Ninja Turtle fever was just starting to take America. And like, that's the thing is Ninja Turtles had the same sort of like larger format toy. They were a little chunkier. They were more colorful. They had like more detail on them than like, the other sort of contemporaries like G.I. Joe and shit. Yeah. So yeah, it does make sense that like people were essentially moving on. Pressman, I believe, secured the IP in 1982 when the toys were brand new.
Right.
And so by the time the movie comes out, like it had kind of run its course. Also, 87 was the release of Life Force, which Canon, again, thought was going to be like a massive fucking hit, and it just collapsed for obvious reasons. That movie is crazy.
It's a weird movie that doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yep. So despite the fact that the budget dwindled to a point that they ran out of money days before the movie was scheduled to wrap, Canon put a sequel into pre-production with Albert Pune directing and a quarter of the budget allocated to the sequel. And at the same time, he was working on Canon's doomed Spider-Man movie, which, holy shit, that story is nuts. Canon snatched up the IP for Spider-Man as soon as Corman lost it. And it turns out that they had no idea who Spider-Man was. They thought he was like a werewolf, but like a spider.
Oh,
and I want that
God.
movie. Oh, I want that, yes. And I want the Dazzler movie. I want them both right now.
Was that the Spider-Man where it was supposed to be played by Charlie Sheen?
I think that one comes a little later on because after Canon sort of dissolves, the IP goes out, and I believe like maybe Carolco got that one because I think they picked up like the Punisher and stuff after that. But yeah,
I only know that because I listened to your episode with Eileen for the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I was like, Charlie motherfucking Sheen, holy shit!
Yeah,
that was a great episode.
What happens though? Oh, thank you. What happens with this particular sequel, because they were like super hot on making a sequel, but Dolph Lundgren didn't want to do it. Basically nobody wanted to do this because this was not a good experience. And so Dolph Lundgren, he says that this was the lowest point for him as an actor. And I was like, whoa, buckle up, buddy.
Also, my guy, this is your first leading role.
And so none of them wanted to do it. And they get Albert Pune to do it, and Stephen Tolkien is the writer on it, and he does sort of like rewrites on this, which is something we should get into later as well. But he was like, I had a lot of fun working on the first one. It sort of came naturally. He was like, when it came to this second one, I had no ideas at all, and I had 3 or 4 days to write it. Ooh. And so he like races through this ridiculous script that is kind of weird nonsense. And the reason they rushed into the production is because the contract with Mattel, the licensing contract, was running out.
Yeah.
And so the best thing about it, though, is here was the premise of the movie. It was the idea that He-Man comes back to Earth to help a woman in a wheelchair. And that's kind of the extent of the story. Help her do what? I don't know. I'm hoping solve crimes, but they never really say. They shot a bunch of shit for it, though, and then they ended up kind of rolling it all into Cyborg.
Oh, yeah, wow. They created all of the sets. They created all of the sets and all of the costumes, and they recast He-Man and Skeletor because, like, Langella had just moved on, and fucking Dolph's not coming back. And they got originally the guy who plays Fender Tremolo, the bad guy in Cyborg, was cast as Skeletor. So in Cyborg, that sort of crazy costume that he wears is the original Skeletor costume without the mask.
Wow.
Huh. Cyborg's a fun one.
Albert Pune is a really, really wild director. Like he was the guy. He was like a canon film dream because he could work very fast on no money. And his movies show, but there's a charm to Albert Pune movies that I absolutely love. I used to email back and forth with him like years ago. Wow. He was a really nice guy. Yeah.
He seems like the kind of guy who he had fun making movies. And you can always tell when people are enjoying what they're doing, or, conversely, you can tell when they don't enjoy it either, i.e. this movie. When I was watching those Electric Boogaloo interviews, the ones with Stephen Tolkien are the most interesting, because he's the one who seems the most willing to be honest about everything, where he's just like, this script, the original script, which is a guy, I think his name is David Odell, who wrote it.
Yes.
Yeah. And he was like, he wrote for the Muppets.
Right.
He wrote Dark Crystal. He wrote like a bunch of big, kid-ish stuff. Well, actually, before I say this, I will say what Gary Goddard was trying to do was make a movie that appealed to children and adults. Yeah. Which I think because they were like, oh, it'll be a universal audience, which guess what, everybody, that doesn't exist. And so he tried to make this movie for both people, which is, you can tell watching this. It's like, what's this movie for? It's kind of weird.
Yeah,
I think they did the same thing with the Ninja Turtles movie, where you're like, this doesn't feel like it's for children.
What was this rated? Lot of the time. Is this PG-13?
This is PG.
This is PG.
No way.
Yeah, but it's a little violent, and there's a bit of cursing.
Yeah.
In it. And it's honestly, just like Frank Langella's weird Shakespeare performance.
Yeah, as I was watching, I was like, wait, this is a kid's movie. It just does not feel that way whatsoever.
Yeah. Right. There's a little bit of a darkness to it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really look like the cartoon at all. It doesn't feel like the cartoon at all. And so I guess the original script was really good. And then Gary Goddard came in and grabbed it and did like a bunch of weird shit to it to bring it to, Earth, because I think it would have been cheaper for them to film. They could film
That's why they did it. It was way cheaper for them to build up like a few sets and do some matte paintings and stuff like that, and a lot of like really fancy costumes, but then spend most of the movie in Whittier, California.
And because Gary Goddard had experience like writing for these like a theme park sort of narrative rides, you can tell because those rides are made for children and adults. Those rides are also 10 minutes long, not an hour and a half.
Oh, this movie's long.
And so they brought it's longer than I expected.
It definitely feels it, and it's not that much longer than like a 90-minute movie. It's about 106 minutes long.
Yeah.
So they bring Stephen Tolkien in he describes it as like having to undo all the things that Gary Goddard did to the movie. And he was like, I did my best. I didn't have a lot of time to work. But he was like, this was originally a good script. It was a fun story. It had sort of an emotional core, because he's really critical about all the weird. He's like, this movie doesn't even really have an ending. And that was because they ran out of money. But he was like, you could have done something. And he kept trying to get them to do have some sort of emotional wrap up. And they were like, no. It's just going to be a big sword fight. And then he pushes them into a pit. I'm like, so basically the end of Star Wars? I don't.
Yeah.
So in the Electric Boogaloo thing, they ask him, so who do you think is to blame for the failure of this movie? And he says, Masters of the Universe was to blame for the failure of Masters of the Universe, meaning that there was a lot of good things there, but because of Gary Goddard going through and hacking up the script, they cut out all the stuff that is sort of essential to a good movie, or at least essential to a good story. And what we're left with is this kind of ridiculous, cheap looking, SFX kind of, I don't know, bonanza, but it's it doesn't do anything for anybody unless you're 5 years old.
Yeah.
Or 40 like me, watching completely delighted.
Or 40. I mean, I will say we are about to say probably a lot of unkind things about this movie. I still had a good time watching it.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I don't not like this movie.
Same.
I wouldn't go out of my way to watch it, but I was entertained.
Yep.
I can say that about it.
Yeah.
So shall we dive in?
Let's do it.
All right. So we open on a pretty sweet map painting of Castle Grayskull. And the narration informs us that at the center of the universe stands Castle Grayskull, and that for centuries, the forces of darkness have been doing everything to conquer it and take its power for themselves, since wielding that power would make them masters of the universe.
And then we get the cheapest fucking credits I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not even, I got to tell you, a big part of what kind of takes me out of this, and I feel makes the movie a lot cheesier than it should be, is Bill Conti's score.
Yeah, because they were like, hey, Bill Conti. So for people who don't know, Bill Conti did Rocky and Karate Kid. He's done huge scores. He's the biggest person on this fucking crew at this point.
Oh, this was for me the moment where the score was tugging at my heartstrings immediately, because I was like, holy shit. It was just it swept me back to when I was 5 or 6 watching this movie.
It is big.
Again, the waves of nostalgia.
Because his score sounds like it's a John Williams ripoff or Jerry Goldsmith. It's these big, sweeping, epic orchestral pieces, but they all sound like the score for Star Trek.
Yes.
Or Superman.
Or Spaceballs.
Or Star Wars.
It gave me Spaceballs as well, except without the laser pew pew, without the laser pings.
Oh, right. Yeah. Because Spaceballs definitely does that knowingly.
Exactly.
Where they're we got to have an overture. And
yes.
Yes.
I will say also Gary Goddard, had said in one of those interviews that he really tried to get them to leave the Canon Group logo off, because he was they had a really bad reputation. And I was like, oh, fuck you, man. Maybe they had a bad reputation, but you're a pedophile who's never made anything after this. Who are you to criticize them?
Yeah, allegedly. As the story commences, the evil Skeletor leads his forces to victory, takes control of Castle Grayskull. His lieutenant, Evil Lyn, informs him that they've nearly conquered all of Eternia, but He-Man continues to lead the rebels against them.
And this is a real media res kind of thing where they just drop us in as though we've been watching this for an hour already.
Oh, yeah. Of course we know about the Civil War on Eternia. Who doesn't?
It is mid-combat.
Yep. Apparently Langella was really disappointed when he saw the Skeletor costume and the concept art, because when he got it, when he got the role, he was he looked at the toys and he watched the cartoon, and Skeletor in the cartoon is buff. He's ripped.
Oh.
And so he went out and body built in order to sort of be fitted into such a costume. And then they drape him with a hood and a big suit of armor and stuff.
Listen, I think he looks great.
I think it's a great, with the exception of the mask, which is very clearly a rubber mask. The rest of his costume is amazing.
It's only partially a rubber mask. A lot of it is just painted directly onto his face.
Oh, wow.
And built up on his face. So it's a lot of applications, but it's not really a full rubber mask. It's just pieces glued on and then painted because they didn't have enough money.
Yeah, that's the part that really, I think, originally threw me when we saw this, like, for the first time, because, like, it's supposed to be a skull. It's supposed to be a skull. It's not, and, like, this thing, like, flexes and kind of warps with the shape of his face. And
that's the thing. It's the mouth. It's the mouth that you can see is specifically it's rubber or whatever the hell it is, and that it's, he's got to fucking talk, but the fact that you see the actual bones, like, moving like rubber, it's just like, as a kid, works. It's like, oh shit. Well, he's doing his best.
No. And so the war is not yet won. For Skeletor to wield the power of Grayskull, the sorceress who protects that power must pass it to him, and she refuses to. So Skeletor puts her in some sort of energy field that drains her power.
And she looks just like Moira Rose from the last episode of Schitt's Creek.
I was gonna say Helen Mirren light. But
a little diet Helen Mirren.
Yep.
What was the name of that horror movie that Moira Rose plays is in Schitt's Creek?
Oh shit! It's
The Crowaning.
The crows have eyes.
The Crowaning.
The crows have eyes.
It's
awesome.
the Crowaning 3.
Oh man!
So the sorceress is played by an actress named Christina Pickles, which is a really funny name. I will not apologize. She will later play Monica's mother on Friends.
No fucking way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, man.
Holy shit!
Everything
full
is connected.
circle. Full circle.
Yep. Now, out on the battlefield, He-Man battles Skeletor's minions amid a series of extremely salacious shots of his oiled-up physique.
Yeah, there are so many abs and thighs, and just every muscle's just rippling, and it's also weird canted angles all the time, and it's like, what is this?
Dude.
Yep. Goddard was like, those pecs have got to be prominently featured.
Yeah, Dolph Lundgren says he felt pretty stupid in that costume.
But the thing is, though, and I don't want to objectify the man in a movie directed by this fucking man. However, Dolph Lundgren, I can't say the fucking last name. Dolph Lundgren is wearing that costume. It's not wearing him. He looks fucking great.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing is I don't like, he's not much of an actor, obviously, but like he really does look the part. Like I don't know who else they could have cast. Like he was a really good choice.
Agreed.
For it, he's beefy and he's like, he's got the physique.
Absolutely.
He's got the hair and
he's
shit.
He's great to look out throughout this entire movie.
And the costume is cool. Like I gotta give it to him. That's all the Moebius costuming too. Like,
and the costuming in this movie is, for some of them, really intense.
Yeah.
Like Meg Foster couldn't even sit down in hers, and it was just like constantly pinching her and like
that sort of bodice that she's in like hurt a lot.
Yeah.
Wow. Well,
and everybody else, like if you read anything about like the people, like the guy who plays Beastman and the other kind of
Beastman
villains,
couldn't close his mouth.
Yeah, Beastman couldn't close his mouth because of the fake teeth, and so he constantly had like saliva and drool just kind of building up. And he would like tilt his head and it would all just kind of spill out. There was other people who they would like accumulate because they were so fucking hot wherever they were. They're filming in California. Oof. So they were so hot that when they would take these costumes off, they would be either completely soaked with sweat or they would have like a puddle of sweat, like a couple inches in the bottom of the costume. And I was like, can you imagine just like walking around in like 3 inches of sweat?
Even the actors who are not, wearing a full mask, like this is a particularly sweaty film. As we get into the action bits, Courtney Cox and her boyfriend, whatever his name is, they're running around drenched with sweat. Everybody's working in this
Pit Stain City.
Oh, absolutely.
And the guy,
everywhere.
there was the guy who played Blade, one of the mercenaries, the sword mercenary guy. He's the one who did all of the fight choreography for sword fighting, because I guess that's kind of what he does. But they had originally put him in this like giant, ridiculous costume, and he was like, "Hey, man, I need to be able to move around. Like, I can't swing a sword and flip around if I'm wearing this like intense costume." And their compromise was that he would shave his head and wear this like headpiece over his eye. And I was like, ooh, weird compromise, but okay.
Sure.
Yeah, because I think the original costume was like neck to toe. Surgical rubber.
Yep.
And so like if he would have fucking died in that costume, like he would have been unable to perspire and, would have overheated and just collapsed. So yeah, so they cut parts of it out. So good for him. We also meet He-Man's friends. We got Duncan and Duncan's daughter Teela. Duncan is Man-at-Arms. And they rescue a little dwarf guy named Gwildor.
Gwildor's a bit of a bright spot in this movie, I think. Billy Barty does a really good job and just sort of like, all right, I'll inhabit this character.
I agree.
Billy Barty is the shit. He's the best.
I didn't expect to still be so, like, tickled by this character, but I was like, I am absolutely here for Gwildor. He is fucking hilarious. I was like, oh shit, this shitty character is going to annoy me through the film. No, I love Gwildor.
Nope. I was also kind of expecting to be like groaning every time he's on screen. Nope. Love him to death.
When he's mooing at that cow, oh my God. Yep. The best.
And he is one of the 3 characters that got an action figure out of the movie. And I remember because I had the action figure.
Right, because they originally he was a stand-in for a character from the cartoon called Orko, who, if you go look him up, you'll understand like why that character would have been very hard for them.
Because he flies and is basically just a magic T-shirt.
Yes. Yep. So Gwildor takes them to his home and shows them why he was captured by Skeletor's people. He has some sort of electronic key, which allows the user to open up doors that go to anywhere.
And then he says, I remember the days we didn't have to lock our doors. And I thought, it's a little Make America Great Again, Gwildor. Why don't you ease up?
Yeah, let's not go
Says
there.
he's making it. He wants to make Eternia great again.
It's very late 80s, very mid to late 80s. There.
Listen, they should have been locking their fucking doors in the 80s. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why kidnapping was so hot. Maybe you should have locked your doors, idiots.
Yeah. So Skeletor's minions are all robots for the same reason that nobody ever gets killed on G.I. Joe. Mattel had very clear rules about how He-Man and how he could be used, and chief among them was that he couldn't kill anybody, but he could trash robots to his heart's content.
Mm-hmm. Same with that's the same with the Ninja Turtles. That's why the Foot Clan and the Ninja Turtles were all robots instead of people.
Yeah. Also, another quality of the movie sort of design that I like, those like robot minions, super cool design.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they were like stormtroopers full through.
Oh, 100% stormtrooper analog.
That's one of the things that I realized. So I wasn't really a Star Wars kid growing up, but at this point I've seen probably not all of them, but a lot of them, and I was like, oh shit, this is trying to be Star Wars.
Yeah, 100%. That was like Canon's sales pitch for this was Star Wars of the 80s.
Oh wow, there you go.
Even though both like 2 of the original Star Wars movies were in the 80s, so you know. So after some sci-fi mumbo jumbo, Gwildor tells them that the key can get them into the castle, but the key leaves behind some sort of signature that Skeletor can zero in on to know where the key is being used, which is an important detail for later.
It's also nonsense that doesn't make any sense.
This movie is basically people going here and there, going over there, doing some stuff,
just
and then
hither and yon.
And they're just saying things.
Oh
just
my
nonsense.
God. The amount of times that they're like, it's only a few proton mutons away. And I was like, sure, whatever the fuck that means. Where are we going?
Yeah. They narrowly escape Gwildor's place as Skeletor's people break in. Luckily, the secret escape passage leads directly to Castle Grayskull.
Yeah, this whole scene just feels like a really cheap 80s music video where it's like clearly directed by someone who does not have a lot of experience directing film, because the camera is just all over the place. And like you're looking at feet, you're looking at someone's back. You're like...
Yep. So there, they find the sorceress in this the energy field, and they can't break through it. But the key can open it and free her, so they get to work on that.
And the key is like a real bitchin' keytar.
Oh, it's amazing.
It's a neat prop. As a matter of fact, that keytar thing will come in later. Mm-hmm. So while they work on that, Skeletor, Evil Lyn, and the minions enter the throne room and confront He-Man.
And everybody's moving at like real sluggish pace because they're all wearing like 80 pounds of plastic and rubber at the same time. Like even the fight scenes, like the sword fighting, you're like, God damn, I just like watch this on 1.5 speed or something.
Yeah, so then we find out that Skeletor's energy field is siphoning the sorceress's power to him. And by the time some fucking phase of the moon comes to pass, all the power will be in him and it'll be too late for He-Man. And that's like a ticking clock quality that if there was any sort of like, I don't know, Earth analog in the story would have helped us out a little bit. Kind of like, you know how Marty McFly's only got like so much time to sort of like make shit happen before he vanishes. This is them just being like, by like moonfall, spinward it'll be too late. It's like, what the fuck is even happening? Like, how the stakes.
They should have leaned into that more, because I was like, what the moon is doing some shit, it's rising at this point. If they had leaned into it more, then we would have been a little bit more tense throughout the film. But there really feels like there's no actual rush to get anything done for the most part.
Yeah. It's also weirdly adult dialogue at this point, where they're like going through this. Again, it's very Shakespearean, where like every time Frank Langella speaks, he has a kind of gravitas that you're just like, you shouldn't be Skeletor, sir. Why are you doing this?
Oh my God, I'm so glad
it's
he did,
all
though.
so dire, and like, you're like, I can't imagine kids watching this and being like, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, because the original Skeletor was like, meow.
Yeah, he was a cackling joke.
Yeah. So, now fight breaks out, one of the first of many, forcing Gwildor to work fast. He uses his cosmic key to open a door to anywhere, and they run through it, dropping the key, which ends up damaged, and it looks like Skeletor is going to get the key when some sort of grappling hook shoots out of the doorway and snatches it up, leaving Skeletor empty-handed.
Yeah, and then he says, monitor the frequencies. And I thought, what frequencies? What are you talking about?
The keytar frequencies,
I
Grab
guess.
that keytar.
Yep. So the door ends up opening on some lake in the hills above Los Angeles somewhere. They get their bearing, and they realize that they have to get back to Eternia as quickly as they can. But there's a problem. The key shook loose in transit and is missing.
And this is when Gwildor starts talking to the cow.
Yeah, because they go looking for it, and all they find is an ordinary cow.
What a hideous
And I
creature,
think, why is
he
this
says.
cow just...
Why? What's this cow doing here?
Why is this cow just roaming around in the like suburban woods? Who does this belong to?
So elsewhere, at a drive-in restaurant, teenager Julie is serving her last customer of her last day, getting ready to leave town for New Jersey for some reason.
Her friend says, don't worry, Julie, they cook fast food in Jersey. And my note says, are you kidding me? I'm pretty sure that's all they cook in Jersey.
Yeah. So she throws take that, Jersey. So she throws on her acid wash denim jacket.
Yeah.
Catches a ride with Kevin, who is maybe her boyfriend or his ex-boyfriend. It's honestly really not clear. Yep.
Her hair in this, Courtney Cox's hair in this movie is really, everyone's hair is a little bit fluffy, and Dolph Lundgren's hair gets progressively fluffier.
Yes.
But Courtney Cox's hair is very 80s.
I was just gonna say this was the high age of mall bangs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but she doesn't have those.
No, thank goodness. It starts rather coiffed, I will say, but as the action gets going and it starts to loosen up, I'm like, all right, girl, I'm feeling your look. She
shakes it out a little bit, and then it works later.
Get a little sweat in there.
Yeah. So he drives her over to the cemetery so she can say goodbye to her parents who are buried there, while Duncan and Tila sneak around outside of the drive-in. So is Gwildor, who uses the grappling hook to steal a bucket of chicken from a couple who are too busy making out in the car to notice.
Gwildor is just housing those ribs. Like, he is real excited about them.
Drinks the cup of barbecue. Ooh. And they're all like, oh, this is delicious. Oh, this food is great. And then they get like grossed out when they realize it's meat from an animal.
Yeah, I guess all Eternians are vegetarian? Perhaps vegan, maybe?
Yeah.
Well, who knows?
I mean...
Yeah. So at the cemetery, Julie tells Kevin that her parents' death was her fault. Something about them flying in her dad's plane when she changed their plans to go to the beach with them in order to hang out with Kevin. It's all very complicated.
It doesn't matter, but the best part is probably the most 80s part of this whole movie is Kevin's just kind of like, Julie, come on. You know emotions make me uncomfortable. Can't we talk about me now?
This was such a surprising, I guess, thing that I remember from this film that I was like, oh shit, right, her parents are dead. And again, I remembered, this is a kid's movie. This is dark as fuck.
You'd be surprised how often that came up in kids' movies. I mean, what was the one with Mary Steenburgen and Harry Dean Stanton, that Christmas movie? Is it One Magic Christmas?
One Magic
where
Christmas.
the father gets like killed in a bank robbery, and this is a children's movie for Christmas.
Wow, look, there's nothing like the 80s.
Right.
They were fearless.
Yeah,
We're just
like,
going to put all this shit
Because
in here.
what's the scariest thing a child could imagine? And it's that. It's
Yeah.
their parents dying.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why would you include that? Only for that dumbass ending.
I also love that
Right,
when she's holding her boyfriend, she's like, "Oh, if only I hadn't, told them to fly to Catalina or whatever without me, because I wanted to spend time with you." And I was like, "Ooh,
I noticed that. Where she blames herself like she's out loud, but like.
But then she's just
really,
like,
she's kind of.
but by the way, it's kind of your fault too, dude."
And that's when he's just like, come on, let's talk about something else. Can we get out of here?
Let's talk about synthesizers because they're about to find one.
Because I'm a musician.
And on the way out. Yep. On the way out of the cemetery to find the missing key, Kevin, a musician, thinks that it's a synthesizer from Japan.
Yeah, he says, this is one of those new Japanese synthesizers. And my note says, don't be racist, Kevin.
Starts jamming out on it. But right, like here's a guy who's like very familiar with synthesizers. Like, in what world does this look like a synthesizer? Anyway.
No, it looks like a prop from Mad Max.
Yeah. Yeah. So back in Eternia, because he's out there like pushing the keys and shit, they have detected the keys' use, and Skeletor puts together a plan to go and get it.
Yeah, and back in Eternia, the canted angles are as strong as ever.
Yeah, so back on Earth at their high school, Kevin, whose band is performing that night he's getting ready for the big graduation dance. He mics up the cosmic key, pushes the big red button, which activates a cool light show, which further tips off Skeletor.
Yeah, Kevin starts dropping some real sick dark wave beats at the school dance. Yeah. And then he's like, I got to mic the synthesizer. And I thought, do you need to mic a synthesizer? It's an electronic instrument.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Evil Lynn assembles a group of mercenaries to go to Earth, scout out the key before Skeletor's main force arrives.
The wigs on these people are magnificent.
I love this creature design. Even though they cannot move their faces, these fucking monster creatures used to scare the shit out of me as a kid. I think they look great. I think they look fucking great.
They're super good. Like that's probably where most of the movie's budget went, was like really cool creature design on that, because they are like legitimately interesting and like cool to look
and
at.
frightening.
And so I had this problem with
Teenage
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where the appeal of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the show, in a lot of cases, was the villains, because everybody looked kind of like big and colorful and fun and goofy. And so those don't show up in the movie. You just have these four turtles, and that's about, and Shredder, who looks like he's just wearing a big metal costume. Mm-hmm. It's the same with this, where like what draws kids to He-Man is that on both sides of their armies, they have these big, colorful, fun-looking creatures. You have 4 of them in this movie. Like, why did you not put more of that shit into your movie?
Here's the thing. With the exception of Beastman, none of those other characters were He-Man characters before the movie. And I was always confused by that, because He-Man had some of the most interesting monster, like toy designs.
You've got
the villains
Trapjaw,
were all really
you've
cool.
got Skunk Man, or Skunkor, or
Stinkor,
Yep.
Webstor, yeah. Everything was an or.
Well, but also
Store.
I found like that, again, this is a kid's movie, but these creatures are actually scary creatures. Like there's this one, this queen with the big foofy white wig. Oh my God. Mm-hmm. I am obsessed with her. Karg
has a magnificent bouffant.
He's wearing like little boots. He's got a hook for a hand. Mm-hmm. I'm obsessed with Karg. Plus the rest of them. Like they're all cool creature designs. And honestly, another thing that I thought to myself, I was like, so Evil Lynn probably had something to do with me being gay now, but also I think Masters of the Universe has something to do with the fact that I love horror so much, because these creatures and some of the action that we get later on, like people are actually bleeding. They look like they actually get injured. I was really surprised, and I think it actually still it holds up now. I thought it looked pretty good.
I think it does. It does bring in not a supernatural element exactly, but it's sort of that era when sci-fi and horror were overlapping a lot. And it does sort of pull from, I guess, fantasy too, to a certain extent. Like it pulls from that, where it's like there is some scariness here, for lack of a better term, that is undefinable, but it does feel a little horror-ish because they do look like one of them looks like a giant snake, and like one of them's a
very reptilian,
a poorly defined beast man.
Yeah,
he's Beast Man. Yeah,
he is Beast Man. You know what Beast Man looks like? Beast Man reminds me. You remember at Bull Moose we had that the bathroom key was on that gross old Alf puppet. Beast Man looks like that gross old Alf puppet with like the matted fur, and it's just like this looks so fucking cheap. And I don't know how you can take this character seriously. He looks like a big fuzzy bear, but but with really cheap fur, and you're just kind of like, oh, this looks matted and sweaty and disgusting. And he can't close his mouth, and those teeth are just like big
whoever's
and plastic.
under there is miserable.
Yeah, blink twice, Beast Man, if you need help, because that's all he can do.
Yeah. There's that one that's kind of like reptilian, that character Saurod.
Ooh.
He's my personal favorite of the bunch.
Yeah.
And he gets the axe pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yep. That character, that suit was reused in a mid-90s Predator ripoff called Star Hunter.
Amazing.
Ooh. Yep. So back on Earth, Kevin takes the key down to the local music shop to see if the owner can tell him what it is. Julie stays behind to see the old high school off one last time. But as soon as Kevin is gone, the cosmic door opens, and Skeletor's people leap into the gym, just start shooting up the place.
Yeah, they are fucking that gym up, too.
Oh, yeah.
They chase Julie around a bit, set the gym on fire, and then they chase her into a junkyard. And thankfully, all that noise attracts He-Man, who hides her and then fights the minions. There's a big sword fight against a guy named Blade. He manages to hold them all off until Duncan and Tila arrive.
Look, that chase sequence is fucking awesome. I was like, this is a precursor to what I consider to be one of the best chase sequences in all of film. Scream 2, fucking Gale Weathers in Scream 2. You remember that chase sequence? It's incredible. And I was like, this scene...
Oh, is that the one in the music?
Yes,
the music
in the
building or whatever.
In the university, and like it's so goddamn good. And in this is a shorter sequence, but I was like, go girl, go! I was really into it, and it's again frightening. Courtney Cox does a great job in this sequence. This was a great chase.
It's like it has all the right beats for a chase sequence. So like they may as well just be like chucking random shit in front of her as she runs.
Blade,
it's just like pallets
she's
of things
underneath the stage of this, like, I guess there's like a prom happening. Blade jams his swords, almost stabbing her, like trapping her in there. I was like, this is fucking awesome. It's so good.
Yep. Kevin takes the key to the music store, shows it to the owner, Charlie, who tells him it's Japanese.
Again, come on, guys.
Yeah. He demonstrates the key, but is distracted when police cars go flying by. The police scanner tells him that the high school is on fire, so he runs back there.
Yeah, when we cut to the downtown at the music store, it's like you cut to the downtown where the riffs are hot and the instrument store is jamming.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That scene is introduced with Purple Haze.
Hell yeah.
And then like Charlie's like, oh man, all hell's breaking loose out there. It's like, Charlie, that was 2 fire trucks. Where do you live where that's all hell?
Yeah. Julie, meanwhile, tells He-Man that they found the key and that Kevin has it. Kevin, meanwhile, is being a nuisance at the high school, mouthing off to the cops who are just trying to do their job. Mm-hmm. He insists on running into the school to look for Julie, even though the hard-nosed cop, Detective Lubick, is pretty clear that they didn't find anyone else in the place, just the janitor who got fucked up by Beastman.
Principal Strickland. Or Vice Principal Strickland.
Right. And this is,
Back to the
what is it,
Future.
James Tolkien?
Yep.
Yeah, who you know from like Back to the Future, fucking Top Gun and shit.
He plays the exact same character every single time, and we love him for it.
Everything. Single time. Guy's got one speed, and he's really good at it.
Absolutely.
So off they go into the night to find Julie. Back at the junkyard, the four think that they're under attack when Gwildor comes driving along in a pink Cadillac that he modified with magic science technology.
Now, how does Gwildor know how to drive?
I don't know. Can he reach the pedals?
I would assume not. Those cars are fucking huge.
Yeah.
But he is having a great time. And that, I think, that's what matters.
The fact that it's pink, I'm just like, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
It doesn't get much more 80s than that. Like, pink Cadillac was just like in everything. It is an Aretha Franklin song.
Yep.
Back in Eternia, Skeletor's people return unsuccessful. Skeletor makes a plan to capture He-Man and see him broken before the rebels of Eternia. He sends Evelyn to Earth with the minions to find He-Man, and once they have, Skeletor will show up and take over.
Yeah, because she was like, oh, these are our best mercenaries. I'm like, your best mercenaries can't even catch one Monica Geller.
Oh, no, they suck.
She's
They're
too crafty.
so bad. But I was like, okay, this woman means business. I'm ready. Honestly, kind of rooting for Eva Lynn. Let's see what happens. Let's go, girl.
Yep.
Let's see what happens.
She turns out to be a perfectly capable hunter.
Absolutely.
Is this the same year as They Live?
That was next. Ooh,
No, They Live is
87 or 88.
It's 88, I think. So she must have done this and then that.
Yeah. Kevin and Lubick, meanwhile, go to Julie's house. She calls from a payphone, and for some reason, Kevin pretends like he's not talking to her.
Well, when they first arrive, the Principal Strickland is like, "Oh, the lights are on, so they must be home." And Kevin says they just leave that on to scare off the burglars. And I was like, "Is there a more '80s thing than leaving on a light? Like, just lock the door, man."
Like, I remember when we would drive by and it'd be like, "Oh, like the store is open," and Mom and Dad would be like, "No, they just leave the lights on to scare the burglars." And I was
like, it says on the door when you're open and closed.
I know. Kevin pretends like he's not talking to her. Then they goof off with the key for a little bit. Lubick declares that he doesn't think it's a synth. His instincts are right, but why doesn't he think it's a synth?
He says, I'm going to take this thing down to the station and I'm going to put it on the computer. And I was like, I don't think he knows what a computer is. Also, what the fuck does that even mean?
So much of this movie is people just making shit up on the fly.
I have to go back to work with desks and files and folders. You know what I'm talking about.
The business factory. So back at the junkyard, Eva Lynn is there with a larger force of Skeletor's robots and the mercenaries from before. They track the key again after Lubick plays with it, but Kevin warms up some chicken in a microwave at Julie's place. It causes the signal to jam.
Yeah, man, don't put paper in the microwave, by the way.
They didn't know that in the 80s. Poor babies.
No. Skeletor's guys sent out some signal to destroy the jam, and the microwave explodes.
Because the bucket was also coated in gasoline because it's the 80s.
And everything's got lead in it.
Yep.
Lubick takes the key, departs for the police station, leaving Kevin behind. Then Eva Lynn and her crew bust in on him, put some kind of hypnotic collar on him to find out where the key is.
That was cool.
Yeah. And they get the information they need and load up on their flying barge and take off, leaving Kevin behind.
The flying barge is kind of cool.
Oh, it
I do. I like that.
Is.
I like those props quite a bit.
You know what it looks like? It looks like one of those like propeller boats that you would do like an alligator tour in Florida.
Oh, like a fan boat?
Yes, that's what it looks like to me. Also, that Eva Lynn collar shit used to freak me out as a kid when Kevin's voice
I thought
changes.
That was a little weird. Whoa. Yeah, it was a little weird. I was like, I don't remember any exploding truth collar in He-Man. Like, what the fuck is this thing?
I did the teeniest bit of research about this film after I watched it, because you guys are so incredibly thorough. But I discovered that this actor, I don't know what the hell his name is, but the guy who plays Kevin went to Juilliard. This is a Juilliard-trained actor here. Which
he's on one of the Star Trek shows.
This guy actually, and I think he directs a lot now. Actually, he produces and directs a lot. But this guy is one of the actors in this film. Does a fine job, but he's one of the actors that you're like, you're not having a great time, is what I think. I was like, I feel like
sure.
you're not that too happy to have signed on to this project. Is the vibe I'm getting.
Yeah.
You got to do what Frank Langella. Just whatever Frank Langella does, do that.
Exactly.
That's the thing. You would imagine like people would go and be like, oh, shit, that's Frank Langella.
Let's do it.
I'm just gonna follow his lead. Yeah.
I mean, that's what Vincent Price used to do in all those fucking awful movies. He would get cast and he'd be like, well, I'm here. I may as well make the most of it and have a good time.
Yep.
Yeah. So as soon as they're gone, He-Man shows up in his pink Cadillac with everyone else, and they take the collar off. There's some comic stuff with Gwildor dressed up in outrageous Earth fashion.
E.T.
Yes, that's immediately what I thought. Yeah. So then they drive down to Charlie's music shop and they get the key back from Lubick. But Eva Lynn's group closes in on them and they have to prepare for a fight while Gwildor works out the buttons on the key to get back to Castle Grayskull.
It really is just like one fight and then they travel somewhere else and then there's a fight there and then they travel somewhere else and there's a fight there. It's like all the movie is.
It is, because what's at the heart of the story is the key is always one step ahead of Skeletor, but there's always room for like a big action set piece. This one's pretty cool because it's like dudes like smashing through windows and they're like blowing up synthesizers and shit. They force a standoff with He-Man. Big explosive action scene takes place. Meanwhile, everyone in the back of the store is trying to keep the gun away from Lubick for some reason, the one guy in the room who knows how to use it. Mm-hmm. And nothing really makes sense in this movie, so fuck it.
And that's when Tila goes, she's in the back room with them, and she goes running out to the front, and she says, it sounded like you needed a woman's touch out here. And I thought, well, that's a weird thing to say. And then she pulls out her gun, and she's holding it like someone who doesn't know what a gun does.
Like she's playing Duck Hunt.
I literally was going to say she's holding it like she's going to play fucking Duck Hunt. But also, this woman's costume, like, we got to go back to the costuming here. First of all, looks fabulous in this costume. However, some of these Eternians or whatever they're called, they got a little thong strap in the back. Did you notice this? I was like, really? Do we really need a thong strap for these people? Okay.
Gotta make it sexy. It's for adults too.
Yeah, it's for adults and children.
Right, exactly. Don't forget the adults.
That's the thing with her and Man-at-Arms costumes. They really kind of got the short end of the stick on this because like everybody else's costumes are pretty awesome. Theirs are fucking boring.
Yeah. And Man-at-Arms is like, he should have been a cool character. The two of them are actually from the cartoon, I believe.
They are.
And she's real kind of boring and lazy. I'm like, who is this character? And who is it supposed to appeal to?
They just need to kind of like give it a little bit more. They're fine, but you know.
When Meg Foster's wearing 19 pounds of fucking makeup and like, 85 pounds of metal, and they're just like, oh, it must be nice to sit down, Tila.
So in the back alley, Julie sees her dead mother walking around, beckoning to her. Completely oblivious to this being an obvious trick.
Yep.
She walks right out there to see her, falls right into Evelyn's trap.
Yeah, because, her mother who's just like, oh, by the way, Monica, we're doing very important work, very secret Monica. Work. I'm like, that's your fucking red flag.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, we had to fake. I'm so sorry, daughter. We had to fake our death because we work for the CIA.
Mm-hmm. Look, I get that everybody can't be a skeptic all the time, but when someone says weird shit to you like that, you really got to step back for a minute and be like, is this my dead mother or not?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but she tells her, she's like, our special secret work depends on that shiny item you've got in there. Can you go get that for me? And so she does. She goes and steals the key, goes out, gives it to the illusion of her mother while everybody's like struggling over the gun. And so now, with the key secured, Skeletor's forces retreat. They use the key to open a door that brings Skeletor and his main force to Whittier, or wherever this is taking place.
Yeah, when it resolves, she's just like, oh my God, that woman took the key. And it's like, well, actually, Julie, that's not true. You gave her the key because you're an idiot.
Yeah. Cool visual effects in this scene here. The door opens up and the big fucking Skeletor barge comes through. Those dudes like marching. I got to give it to them. The visual effects in this movie are legitimately pretty good. Like, I love a like big, colorful, like optical effect. They do it pretty well in this one.
Well, they fucking should. It's all the movie is.
There's some more fighting. Some guys on flying discs. He-Man kills one of them and flies off on the disc. It's all pretty ridiculous.
Oh, it's
and
hilarious.
This is where his hair is so fluffy. It just keeps getting fluffier.
I love it, though,
fluffier.
watching him flying around on that thing. Also, like, the ratio is, like, kind of off because the graphics are off. So, like, when they get low, they look like literal little army men. It's hilarious.
Because they kind of are. Because this was one of the places where they were like, we can't obviously send Dolph Lundgren flying around on a little disc. So... Then they didn't have a stunt person to do it. So there are parts of it where it's like, oh, that's clearly just a little plastic Dolph Lundgren figure flying around on a little disc.
And it still worked for me. I was like, hell yeah, fly around on your little disc. I love this.
I was happy with it. Yeah, I didn't.
I love it. I won't lie.
Yeah.
I love it.
It just flies off into the night.
Yep. It says He-Man uses the grappling hook to steal back the key, kill off the rest of the flying disc guys. Unfortunately, with He-Man gone, Skeletor sneaks up on Gwildor and the rest of the Eternians.
He rises behind them like hilariously and ominously, very slowly. It's like someone doing that canoe trick behind the couch. It's just going upstairs and going down the stairs. Like, he just sort of comes up out of nowhere.
Yeah, and then he takes them all hostage. So when He-Man does arrive, he falls right into Skeletor's clutches. Julie tries to warn him, but Skeletor shoots her with hand lightning. There's a lot of fighting until Skeletor gives him an ultimatum. Go back to Eternia as his slave and save his friends, or die with them. So He-Man surrenders.
This is where Gwildor says, I would never knowingly serve the Lord. And then he lingers for like a couple of beats and then says, of Snake Mountain. But it sounds like he's just saying, I would never knowingly serve the Lord. And I was like, good for you, Gwildor.
better to reign on Earth than to serve in heaven.
That's right.
Skeletor takes He-Man back to Eternia, leaving the Eternians stranded on Earth. Now, they still have their key, but it was damaged in the fight. Julie's leg wound from the hand lightning is turning into something really nasty and bubbly.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that shit
what
looks nasty.
It
looks good. Damn.
Ooh. Yeah.
But they all act like she's in like the final stages of renal failure.
Well,
like, if we don't do
it's
something
poisonous,
now, she's
apparently.
gonna die.
They're fully like the poison is in her system. Holy shit. That looked gnarly.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, if they don't get her back to Grayskull, where the sorceress can heal her, Julie will die. And so all looks lost. The key uses uses music to open the door, but Skeletor erased the tones when he shot it with hand lightning. Kevin has an idea, though. He remembers the melody that the key played when it opened the door, so he runs off to Charlie's to get a synthesizer that they can wire up to the key.
I love that Kevin he's like, I have perfect pitch. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Which is something they throw in earlier, which I was like, that'll come back later on. Love that.
He also says, I'm just a stupid keyboard player in a high school band.
No,
There's
you're
a
not,
million
Kevin.
It's
You
like,
can do it.
It's like,
Yeah,
Kevin,
believe in yourself, guy.
Yeah. Also, really? There's a million of you? Not for long, there won't be.
So back in Eternia, Skeletor plans to have He-Man tortured so that everyone in Eternia can see their leader broken.
And this is a Christ allegory, right?
Ooh.
I mean, there's the
I
whipping and
guess.
he's like something like about stabbing him and then they're like whipping him. And I'm just like, okay. I don't know if people are getting this weird Christian allegory, but sure.
Yeah. On his way to the throne, Skeletor grabs his staff from a little pig boy. And this role is actually called Pig Boy, and was awarded to a little kid named Robert Sponder, who won a contest to be in the movie.
And he is in the credits as well.
Yep.
Big boy.
Yep.
Bless him.
Yep. Pig Boy. The sorceress isn't doing well. She's nearly drained. There's a lot of Skeletor monologuing here. He-Man refusing to bend the knee.
Yeah, this gets real dramatic, and I was like, "This is a fucking kids movie."
Wow.
Yeah.
Also, she's giving me Beetlejuice. Her age, her like old age makeup. You know the scene at the end where Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis are like kind of like withering away? That's what she kind of gave me in this sequence.
Yep. Back on Earth, Lubick and the cops spot Kevin driving past in the Cadillac, and he chases him back to their spot where Gwildor has the key wired up to all this crazy shit. He's about to rush in and arrest them all, but we have to go back and see what Skeletor is up to, so we'll come back. Turns out Skeletor is about to be transformed with the power of Grayskull. More monologuing, then Skeletor is transformed and outfitted in a new suit of golden armor.
And he looks just like Kim Cattrall at the end of Big Trouble in Little China. And it turns out there's a reason for that, because Gary Goddard, in one of those interviews, he was like, well, I was trying to come up with like a scene for this, and I was really thinking of Big Trouble in Little China at the end. And I was like, oh, it fucking shows. You may as well have just transported that whole movie right into yours.
That helmet is amazing and hilarious, though. It has like bat wings in the back, golden bat wings.
Oh yeah, yeah. So Goddard has said in like interviews that a lot of his inspiration in making this movie was he wanted to do like a fourth world thing, which is like a long series of comics that Jack Kirby did for DC. That's like a lot of like ancient astronaut type stuff, but like high drama and like sci-fi fantasy and stuff. And it totally shows here. Like that helmet looks like a Jack Kirby drawing. It's got like horns going this way and horns going that way, and it's all like very segmented.
It's fucking
and shit. Like, I
gold. Like
that.
the entire thing. Yeah. I was like, where can I get this Halloween costume? Because I would win all the contests.
You have to make it. Unfortunately,
you absolutely would. Yeah.
Why is he wearing it, though? Is it just because they needed to punch this moment up?
He is the master of the universe, so that's what you get.
Transformed with the power of Grayskull. Yeah. So yeah, you know, we're kind of tuning up here for the the big boss fight. Lubick interrupts the process of turning on the key, but it's too late. The door opens and transforms the entire city block to the throne room of Grayskull.
Half car and everything. And I'll be damned if this does not look like it was supposed to be like an action figure playset.
Absolutely. Or like a small Black Spock theater set. I was like, this is where the action happens right here on this teeny little set. I love this.
Mm-hmm.
It's so great. Yeah, we got a big special effects firefight. Lots of lasers going all over the place. He-Man fights his way to Skeletor for the big showdown. Evelyn has all of her people retreat, leaving Skeletor high and dry. And then He-Man goes on to retrieve his magic sword from the dais, but Skeletor keeps shooting him with hand lighting. So he fights through it and raises the sword over his head, declaring, "I have the power," which is what we've all been waiting to hear.
You guys, I got emotional.
Was this a
I'm
moment
not
for you?
gonna lie. I was
That's
like,
beautiful.
I was like, Johnny, keep it together. Keep it together. Because I knew it was coming, but I had forgotten. And the moment he did it, I was like, okay, just take a deep breath. You're fine. I thought it was beautiful. Also, I just need to give another little shout out to fucking Evelyn. That hoe, she's standing back there, like her little eyebrow goes up and she's like, it's time to go. And I was like, this smart, evil bitch was just like, bye.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Oh yeah, she knows when to fold, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, he and Skeletor have their big fight. It was at this point the production ran out of money, like, completely. To finish the movie, Goddard had to finance a few days of production out of his own pocket. So they shot this final fight scene with a skeleton crew and used all sorts of camera tricks to make it not so obvious that it's just He-Man and Skeletor in this scene. Honestly, they could have done a lot worse. Like, it's a pretty cool.
Not to give the man credit, but I didn't mind this fight sequence. The two actors are going for it. You know, and I kind of liked the sparse lighting, if you will, you know.
This was the part that Stephen Tolkien was most upset about. He was like, you could have done anything, and you did a ripoff of Empire Strikes Back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So He-Man manages to break Skeletor's staff, which transforms him back into plain old Skeletor. And then they fight some more, and then Skeletor falls off the platform and down into whatever is at the bottom of that pit. Mm-hmm. Victory belongs to He-Man.
And Moira Rose is returned to her former self.
She looks fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
So sometime later, it's not clear how much time has passed. Everyone is getting ready to go home.
And they're all...
for some reason, has elected to stay and is hooked up with a hot Eternian babe.
Yeah, I don't understand. Like, they make it seem like, oh, you know, all I had back on Earth is my bitch ex-wife. I gotta stay here. Like, I don't give a fuck about this guy. I know nothing about this character. Why are they acting like it matters?
If that character Lubick was not in this movie's story would change zero.
Yeah.
He is the most disposable character. I don't understand him at all. His motivations are strange and unknown. I don't get it. And he's not even like a beloved, because this is a setup for a sequel that they had already put into production.
Sure.
And it's not like he's this like beloved character that we all want to see come back.
He's not the comic relief. He's not anything. But this is where we get that like end of Wizard of Oz ending where it's like, I'll miss you most, He-Man. It's like, you are all acting like your best friends. You met 8 fucking hours ago. You don't give a shit what happens to the people in Eternia.
Yeah. So then they all say goodbye. Gwildor sends them home.
Good journey.
Back on Earth. Yeah. Oh, good journey. That's right.
I love that. I thought that was so sweet. Their little weird hand gesture or whatever they do. It's not weird. It's beautiful. Yep. I was like, oh, this is so sweet. Good journey, y'all.
It's very much like go with God.
Yeah.
Back on Earth, Julie wakes up in her room.
Oh, in the most hideous nightgown. Oh, she looks positively Mormon.
Yeah.
It's probably 1,000,000 degrees too, because it's like a heavy cotton nightgown. Yeah. It's like ankle to neck.
Oh.
She goes downstairs. She finds that her parents are alive and that she was sent back to before they got on the plane that crashed.
This ham-fisted piece of shit. And you know this was like a studio thing where they were like, oh, no, you cannot kill that girl's parents. You have to bring them back at the end of the movie. I understand it's central to your plot, but...
Right, because at the same time, like, that Canon just does whatever Canon wants. Mm-hmm. I think at this point they were very, very sincerely beholden to MGM, who was distributing all of their stuff. And like with all of their movies tanking as hard as they where MGM was like, no. We're going to have a happy ending here, all right?
Like, here's $30, go film it.
Question, though, because at the end, when she's like being pulled back through the light portal or whatever back to Earth, Gwildor has said, he's like, I can send you in the past or to the future, whatever you want. And she's screaming. She's like, Gwildor, wait, do this. Do you think that she's asking him to send her back?
I think that was what she was going
that the
to
intention?
do. Like that,
yeah,
but
they do it anyway.
They do it anyway. Yeah. I was like,
so
this
like,
is an interesting
his
choice.
gift to her.
Sure.
So what does that scene do for the rest of the movie? That it's completely unnecessary if your character is already going to do that.
I don't know. I don't know. It's supposed you go, hey, happy ending. Isn't this great?
Oh, the ending is real dumb. It's like some real ham-fisted shit.
Yeah, so then she stops them from leaving, runs out into the street to find Kevin.
Oh, Kevin gets to wear the same outfit he had on before, but Julie has this god-awful night dress on.
Yeah. Roll credits. However, at the very end of the credits, Skeletor's head pops up from the water and announces that he'll be back.
Yep, Carrie White's arm shoots up out of the ground.
Yep, he will not. He definitely will not be back, and maybe that's for the best.
My God.
Wow. Nicely
Masters
done.
of the Universe.
What a movie. Well, listen, we watch these movies and rewatch them, and at the end of these culty films, I gotta ask, Jonathan, do you think this movie was successful at achieving whatever goals it was trying to do? It's a little exploitation-y.
Do I think it was successful?
Does this work for what they were trying to do?
You know what? No, it does not. I don't think it reached any of the intended goals for the studio or for any of these actors or anything. But for me, it worked. You know,
100%.
like I've already said it. I had a really fun time with this film. I was thoroughly entertained. It really took me back. It is a definite treasure of my childhood. So for me, it works. But was this the intended outcome of this film? Definitely not.
No.
Yeah, the thing we didn't say was that part of the objective of this movie was to, at least by the time it came out, was to revive the IP in the toys. And so it's like, if the objective is to sell movie tickets and revive this toy line and cartoon line, I would say they failed pretty bad at both of those
Now,
things.
I wonder if this had like a at one point you see like Burger King stuff in a sink for some reason. I wonder if this had any of that going on.
Definite product placement for sure.
Yeah, like, you know, if you could get the action figures at like Burger King or something like that. I wonder.
Ooh, I do wonder.
Yeah,
I wonder.
interesting.
I know, because Mattel only made 3 toys for this. Probably because by the time it came out, they were like, nobody's buying this shit anymore. We're not investing more money in it.
Listen, if they didn't make a fucking Keytar or a pink Cadillac, then they failed, because that's what they should have done.
Yeah, that was their fault.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, it's usually at this point in the podcast where Dave asks, like, does this movie hold up? And what's interesting for me thinking about this is I did not really like this movie when I saw it when I was 11, but now watching it as a fucking old-ass man, I enjoyed the hell out of it, which is really a fucking weird turn.
Yeah.
So, that's the thing about this, is that you made a movie. It's a little bit, again, like the last time we did this was Ninja Turtles. It's a little bit like that, where it's like, you made a movie that was supposed to cash in on the popularity of this thing. You failed very badly at that, because this doesn't resemble the thing you're trying to cash in on at all. This, if anything, this movie bears a resemblance to like a lazy Star Wars knockoff more than He-Man. And yet, now that we have all of this context and all of this sort of history behind us, we can say, no, this is not a good He-Man movie. It's barely a good movie, but it's real fun to watch.
Absolutely.
Because it's just like a cheap, Battle for the Planet or Battle of the Stars, like shit like that, where you're like, it's just a dumb sci-fi movie. And if you just watch it that way, it's pretty fun.
Well, from what I understand, it's actually become like a bit of a cult classic. And, I also agree.
Oh, this movie, for Umbrella to put out that version of it that they did, like a real premium release.
I mean, that's amazing.
I mean, that says something.
I agree that I think this absolutely holds up, but I think it's important to go into this movie knowing information about some of the people involved. I think that's definitely good to know. But correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there's a new Masters of the Universe live-action film coming out in a few years.
Yep. I think it's been in production for a while.
Wow. Well, honestly, I'm interested. I would totally watch it.
Hell yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Jonny.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
It is always a pleasure to have you on here. What do you got going on? What are you plugging?
Okay, listen, y'all. So, first of all, you need to listen to Eileen's episode where you did Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, right? The first one, not Secret of the Ooze, right?
No, we did the very first 1991.
So you got to listen to that episode. It's amazing. So, but if you don't know, Eileen and myself, we host a podcast called Uy Que Horror. It's a Latinx horror movie podcast. We cover horror movies specifically from Latin America. If they star anybody from Latin America, or they're directed by a Latin American person, or take place in a Latin American country, we cover those films. You can find us at Uy Que Horror, which is UYQUE horror. All over the place. Instagram, Twitter. We've got a TikTok now that Eileen runs, and she does incredible work with it because Grandpa over here does not do TikTok. As for myself, you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Jonny Elliott. That's JONNYELIOT. And Eileen and I release episodes every other week. And in between, we also release a little Patreon episode. If you want to sign up for our Patreon, you can also find it at Uy Que Horror. It's $1 to sign up, so please do. We release a bunch of goofy videos, and yeah, that's what I got for you.
Definitely follow up on that. Uy Que Horror is one of my favorites. I don't miss an episode. You guys are the best.
Oh, thanks, guys. Same. Ditto.
Dave.
Yeah.
Dave, what's next?
Well, as you said, Bring Me the Axe will be back in 1 week. It is our 50th episode.
Hey.
And we are going to be talking about the iconic Silence of the Lambs, which means I have 1 week to get my accent game on point, because that one is rich with opportunities. And then this 99-cent rental will be back in 2 weeks, where we're talking about my best friend Godzilla in a movie called Ghidorah, Three-Headed Monster.
Yeah.
Hey, congratulations, you guys. 50th episode. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Right? That's crazy,
That's
right?
amazing.
Yeah.
We made it.
Yeah.
Nicely
So
done.
it's a real milestone. Yeah. So be back here in a week as we put the lotion in the basket, Silence of the Lambs, and we'll be back at 2 with Ghidorah, the Three-Headed Monster.
Hell yeah.